Hey, welcome to podcast Storm, or Socially Awkward Out Culture. With me, as always, is my co-host, the nerdy co-host, aka the educator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Good evening, everyone. Also, Brainstormer, I don't know if it's on my end or yours, but you appear to be roboting a little bit.
I don't know what you want me to do, man. I've never been able to
Okay,
fix that.
it's gone now. Apparently, I don't know if it was on my end or yours, but it's gone now. I will let you know if it happens again.
I'm your time. I want to be the Brains Pop Culture. How's everyone doing tonight?
I'm doing okay. How was everyone's Thanksgiving, also, by the way? Considering it was like 2 days ago.
Fine. Nothing of no consequence or anything of note.
I have been subsisting on leftovers for the past 2 days, as is the regulation standard.
My show was so critical or all the time. Like, it was very robotic of you.
What now?
It was very robotic of you. Like,
To what?
With what you just said. Like, it's very robotic of you. Like, that was. You're a weird dude.
He says as though he has not known me since 2019.
I can know you for that long and still think you're weird.
No, it's not that you think it is the amusing thing. The amusing thing is you're saying it as though it is new information to you, even though we have been friends since 2019.
You still find ways to surprise me with how weird you are.
I suppose that's a good thing. Alternatively, you might just not pay that much attention. Well,
the sandwich thing.
I still find it amusing that of all the eccentricities that I have and wear on my sleeve, that is where you draw the line.
Everyone likes sandwiches. Everyone. Fucking
well,
kittens.
in this instance, grilled cheese notwithstanding, I suppose I am not in the category of everyone.
Even the weirdest of weirdos, which I don't really qualify you as because you're actually somewhat stable mentally, like sandwiches. It's just like, that is the weirdest thing I know about you. That will always be the weirdest thing I know about you.
Well, you have very odd threshold for weird, sir.
Okay, we've gone over this
Anyway,
before.
on
No, again,
on with the show.
no. You're not pivoting yet. We're not pivoting this yet. And it's going to be the weirdest thing because everything else has a purpose and a use. It is basically a tool in your, I guess, work belt, if we're keeping the analogy going. And I have found, and it just makes you really interested in given your depth of knowledge of those things. But the sandwich thing, that has no place among any of that stuff. And it's just a weird quirk of yours that I cannot wrap my head around because it makes, for one, you've never actually given me a proper explanation of why you don't.
Haven't
And
I?
no, you just say you never like sandwiches.
It's partly the various foods intermixing, and partly a texture thing.
Okay, I could get the foods mixing thing. Granted, I don't mind that per se. I get it for some people. The texture thing, I think that's somewhat odd, but I get it. Yeah, you've never told me that. Like again, every time I brought it up, you always just say like you don't like them.
Because I usually don't think it warrants a explanation, but since you're interested in having them, yes, it is partly a food mixing issue and partly the things that normally go in sandwiches do not texturally work together very often, with the exception of grilled cheese. And even then, some people put ham in grilled cheese for no explicable reason, and that is just several layers of wrong as well.
I should try one with tomato in it.
Why do you
I agree with that one.
people why do you people insist on ruining the one sandwich that I can actually tolerate?
Okay, I will agree to the tomato one. That's a weird one. I don't mind with ham because I actually have
Well,
made
and
those
part of
before and
that
they're
may
really
just
good
be
too.
that I don't like ham in general. Like I like other cuts of pork, but I don't like ham. It's just bleh.
Well, actually, I don't really like it neither. I'm more of a turkey guy.
Ditto. Anyway, if the culinary inquisition of my dietary habits is over, we can proceed with the rest of the show.
Also, hope everyone's starting their Christmas list now.
I
got
am,
mine done
yes.
for I got mine done for Dalton. I need to do mine for myself, but
A guy I've been talking to today texted me and asked me to send him an Amazon wish list so he could pick something out for me for Christmas. That's the first time anyone that I've met on a dating app has done that. And then I had to spend half the day figuring out how in the fuck lists work on Amazon because for the longest time I just used my cart and my save for later list. I didn't make other lists.
no, you talking to a guy. Okay, that's the first time hearing about it. All right.
I didn't feel the need to mention him because nothing as yet has happened, either very good or very disastrous. So,
Okay, that's actually pretty fair. Just usually when you meet someone, you
yeah,
usually tell me about it.
it's
And
either because I get the honeymoon butterflies, or because someone ghosts me after 3 fucking days. And this guy, so far, has done
okay,
neither of those things to me. So far,
for the record, he does hurt you. He's fucking dead.
yes,
And let me actually, hold on. Let me rephrase that because I'm
the homicidal defense thing is mutual. Because if anyone ever hurts you, they are going to get forge mastered, like in fucking Castlevania.
okay, let me rephrase that because I realize I'm being recorded. He is dead on a personal level on the fact that I will not interact with him. Granted, I don't interact with him now, but if there was ever a chance, no. If he's dead to you, he's dead to me in that regard.
I am not going to soften my declaration of homicidal friendship for the sake of the algorithm. If people hurt my friends and the people that belong to me, they will die screaming in a pool of their own blood if I have anything to say about it.
It's for legal reasons because I'm being recorded and this can be used in a fucking court of law.
Yes, and I don't mind it being used in that way.
Okay, unlike you, who would survive in prison because you're fucking weird and also probably would be willing to be a bitch, I wouldn't. Nor do I want to.
Fair. So your disavowal is noted, as is presumably my refusal to disavow. Because people don't fuck with the things that are mine, and my friends are definitely in the category of things that are mine.
Okay, a bit weirdly possessive, but I respect it. To a degree.
You forget that I am essentially a winter-infused predator, my friends.
Predator's a bit much. You can barely walk without without aid.
Bold of you to assume that would stop me from fucking up someone if I needed to. But anyway, moving along.
How brittle are your bones right now?
I do not have osteogenesis imperfecta. As relatable as Mr. Glass is, it is not because we have the same fucking disorder, my dude.
Okay.
I actually, to the best of my knowledge, have never had a broken bone, despite all of the falls and surgeries and shit that I have taken.
But if I were to flick you right now, what's that percentage that your skin would bruise from that?
Like 50 to 70%, somewhere in that range, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
but again, bold of you to assume that prevents me from being a predator. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah, I'm still waiting on the article to load.
Mm-hmm.
Give me 1 sec. Fucking thing. So we've gotten a few inches of snow where I'm at.
Yeah, we got snow yesterday. We didn't get any more today, but we did get snow yesterday.
We're still getting it, so.
Which means we'll probably get it in a day or two, because that's how these things work.
Yeah. How lucky I am. Well, I want to. It depends on how you describe lucky. I'm not going to be able to go to work for the next week or so. I think I've mentioned it before, but yeah, Monday I'm going to be getting an oral surgery because I have bad teeth.
Did you decide either way as to whether you're going to get them all done in one go or if you're going to wait?
It's still undecided. I'm probably going to have to wait until I go there and talk to them about it real quick before I go in for it.
Fair enough.
I mean, I've already paid for the whole thing overall, so it feels like I kind of have to let them do the whole thing.
If I were you, I would just have them get the whole thing done at once. That way you only have to be down for however long it takes you to recover from the whole thing, instead of getting half done now, still being out, and then getting half done later when you do the other half again.
Well, again, it's why it was kind of set in the winter, because my work slows down in the winter, so I'd have a greater chance of being able to skip time and not have to worry about the paycheck. But
yeah. Also, granted, I have a lot more experience with surgeries than you, and so it's one of those things that does not in any way faze me.
I have been told by someone close to me that I'm a bit of a bitch, so it would make more sense if I did it one time and wait a month and have the other side done.
I am going to guess who that is. I will not say for the sake of being online, but I am going to guess who told you that.
Yeah,
Is my guess correct? because you know exactly who I'm referring to.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Be fair with this, I don't think he's entirely wrong because I've never had this done to me before, so it would be real.
Which is fair. Again, like I say, to me, a surgery is basically nothing at this point. But for someone who hasn't been in and out of hospital since before they were 5, I can imagine it being slightly more of a big deal.
Yeah. So honestly, I mean, again, I paid for basically the whole surgery itself already, so logically it would make sense. But then again, honestly, I might just have to
I'd
do
just
one
get them all done and rip the metaphorical band-aid off, but that's just me. And again, I realize I am not normal in this regard because most people
Yeah.
haven't had more exposure to surgeries when they were 5 than most elderly people get, even in their golden years.
My concern would be if I have to pay for the next one as well, or if I'm paying for, if I have to pay for both sides, then again, or so. Questions for when I go there, I suppose. Granted, I would be fucked up because I had to.
It's ultimately up to your schedule, so keep that in mind. Anyway, is the thing loaded yet?
Yeah, it's loaded.
Okay, huzzah.
Also, FYI, well, not FYI, but just so everyone has been made aware, if I'm still feeling kind of out of it, by time we might have to move the podcast or skip a week, just so I can still be recovered.
Yep,
so
I figured that was likely going to happen.
Yeah, so I will make sure to let everyone know either before, or I'll make sure to let everyone know before the next Saturday if I'm up for it or not. Well, assuming I'm conscious enough to remember.
Lucid.
But yeah, I mean, the first few days I'm probably gonna be fucking asleep all day. Hopefully. God, going to it's gonna be a bitch.
Anyway, on with the stupid that must be defenestrated for this evening.
Yeah, it's from the telegraph.co.uk. Men portrayed as either frightening or pathetic in film and TV, as written by Charles Hymas, published November 15th, 2025. Subheader is calls for a masculinity reset to provide boys with positive role models in popular culture.
Yeah, whose idea was it to get rid of all the positive masculine role models because something my patriarchy? This strikes me as a you're creating people sick and commanding them to be well situation, to paraphrase Christopher Hitchens. You are creating the problem of a dearth of masculine role models and then blaming boys and men for that lack, and or blaming other people than yourselves for creating that precise issue. Anyway, moving on.
Men are being portrayed negatively in popular culture as either pathetic or frightening. Most people believe. A poll of more than 2,000 people found that most believe that films, television, and adverts are failing to provide boys with proper role models, such as the strong, silent, but kindly hero of previous generations.
I mean, I don't think this is a public perception thing. I think that's just people being aware of reality. Because for the longest time now, what did people have in terms of masculine role models? Like the Marvel heroes, and even then most of them post Phase 4 have been whacked with the ESG DEI stick. Because, Cap is no longer a thing. Thor is a joke now. Sam Wilson, in an attempt to change him from the Falcon into Cap, made him a extremely politically divisive brat. Iron Man is, of course, dead. Spider-Man is in a perpetual state of adolescence to begin with, and then, wiped from people's history as per No Way Home. And there's very little actual focus on Bruce Banner as a character, or even the Hulk as a character anymore. So, like, yeah, what masculine role models do people have in 2025? Because for the longest time, Marvel movies were basically the only like masculine role models that were not portrayed as either toxic or pathetic, usually some combination of the two. And that has shifted as of Phase 4 and shifted even more into Phase 5. I mean, I guess kids today have Billy from Agatha All Along, but he's a very feminine gay dude. So there again, you may have...
So you're wrong.
You may have... Honestly, it's probably the other way around. That's why I occasionally refer to him as Mini-Me, but that's neither here nor there. But point being, even if there are male characters who are positive, they usually are portrayed as positive because they either disavow or never had any masculinity to disavow in the first place, which just leads to a more subtle variation on let's demonize masculinity. Moving on.
Hello, John. Good to see ya. At work, gonna be late. Sorry. Hope the stream is good. By the way, left comments on 1 or 2, and if any response was there, I missed it. If nothing to say, then sure. But I'd be surprised Dalton didn't.
I didn't get a chance to look at Discord after joining the stream, so I will look at those after the stream.
No, on the streams, like in the comments.
Okay, I'm going to have to go back through the old streams and stuff then.
I think it's only been the few couple that we've done lately, like the last couple.
Okay, so yeah, I will go back through the backlog of episodes and respond accordingly. I don't actually get notifications for this channel because it's through Brainstormer's computer that we have this channel. So that might be why I didn't see them. I have to actively go looking for comments on this channel. So that's my bad, and or YouTube not letting us share the channel equally and stuff. Anyway, we will catch you, or we will wait for you to catch up when you get the chance to catch up, and or you can always leave comments on the rewatch there, DT. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah, he's at work, so he's not here. I think he just popped in to let us know. Just
to note it for the record, which is appreciated. Moving on.
Instead, those questioned say men are presented as either hapless, ineffectual people, characterized by Daddy Pig from Peppa Pig, Homer Simpson and Family Guy's Peter Griffin, or monstrous figures such as Jamie Dornan, serial killer Paul Spector in The Fall. Okay, I've never seen that.
Yeah, I don't know that specific example, but the problem remains the same. Men are either pathetic morons or dangerous sociopaths in a lot of media. To the point that people, and this is the thing, as much as I hate the media needs to be reflective of reality herder thing, because that's stupid, I do think on some level it does subtly impact the way women think about men. And you can tell because the phenomena like men thinking about the Roman Empire seems to have utterly blindsided a lot of women on TikTok. I think because people assume that the like adult sitcom dynamic of the nagging, morally virtuous, intelligent wife and the impulsive, destructive dolt of a husband that is represented by things like Family Guy, The Simpsons, and even kid shows do it. Like, for example, the dichotomy between Jack and Maddie Fenton in Danny Phantom, or the dichotomy between Cosmo and Wanda, or Mr. and Mrs. Turner to some degree in The Fairly Odd Parents. That just seems to be the default like sitcom mode, is hyper intelligent, hyper competent, nagging, morally virtuous wife, and the dolt, the impulsive and destructive dolt of a husband that she settled with like an albatross. And again, I am by no means saying that media has to reflect reality, Herder, because stupid, but it does seem that basically being a universal trope does seem to have affected the way that a lot of women think about a lot of men, to the point that they're surprised that a lot of men think about deeper intellectual concepts like the Roman Empire meme. Or I saw another one recently where a woman was surprised that her husband daydreams about saving people Die Hard style. And again, that strikes me as it might have something to do with the bumbling dumbass dad and virtuous intellectual nagging wife trope. And again, this wouldn't be a problem if it weren't seemingly the universal default for all couples in fiction. Or at least so pervasively that people just think it's normal. I think the solution there is just to have a diversity of tropes, a diversity of character dynamics. That way there is no like default set trope. Anyway, moving on.
The study by Center for Social Justice calls for a masculinity reset in which male and female qualities are treated positively and equally by the mass media.
Okay, Institute for Social Justice, was it? You
Center
for Social Justice. Center for Social Justice. You lot are very frequently the source of this problem, because in addition to women are wonderful in all circumstances and or hyper competent in all circumstances, there is this we have to demonize and belittle the patriarchy trope that is unique to social justice, which does lead to this dichotomy. If a man is competent, he's dangerous, and if a man isn't dangerous, then he's incompetent. And to be fair, there's even the third category where a man is both stupid and dangerous in a lot of media. And in fact, most of the Orange Man bad memes in recent years portray Trump, for example, as both stupid and dangerous, or both stupid and evil. So yeah, I'm going to have to press X to doubt the good intentions of the Center for Social Justice, because that might as well read turkeys in favor of Thanksgiving, or rather Thanksgiving enjoyers who prefer turkey. Because again, to paraphrase the Christopher Hitchens quote, it seems very much like you are creating the very problem that you are now only just realizing that you might want to fix. It is largely the infiltration of ideologies like third wave intersectional feminism and broader social justice that created the cultural ubiquity of this dichotomy. Granted, it was still there in the 90s and early 2000s. That's why I mentioned shows that came out around that time, like, again, the dichotomy between Jack and Maddie Fenton in Danny Phantom, the dichotomy between Cosmo and Wanda, and Mr. and Mrs. Turner to some degree in Fairly Odd Parents. This trope of woman is hyper competent, hyper capable, and saddled with taking care of her dolt of a husband or her dolt of a male significant other is as old as the hills. But social justice has created a moral and intellectual veneer around those things that mandated that dichotomy becoming even more universal and even more ubiquitous, to the point that actual IRL women are surprised when their husband or boyfriend isn't a Homer Simpson or Peter Griffin type. When a man shows that he does actually have intellectual bona fides that just happen to be different from a woman's bona fides, as we saw with the Roman Empire thing and the aforementioned Die Hard thing, it means that means by default a lot of women presume that it's their job to be the morally upstanding intellectual nag, because all men are either dangerous, stupid, or both. Moving on.
All right. Study. The research is part of the think tank's wider Lost Boys study, which published its first report in March 2025. This found women and girls aged 16 to 24 in both white-collar and blue-collar jobs were earning nearly 10% more on average than their male peers. The number of males aged 16 to 24 who are not in education, employment, or training increased by 40% compared to just 7% of females since the pandemic.
And again, I hate to burst your bubble, Center for Social Justice, but this is partly, at least, your fault. All that affirmative action, diversity hiring shit, that always prefer a female candidate over a male one in as many circumstances as possible, really helped create this problem. Now, again, this problem was always a bit of a problem because people very often, sort of by definition, presume that women are more morally perfect or more competent and capable than their male counterparts to some degree. And a lot of people would just generally prefer to surround themselves with female people than male people. But social justice took what used to be kind of an informal axiom in the 80s and 90s and morally codified it as the correct thing to do, both intellectually and morally. And there again, we wind up with the Christopher Hitchens quote of, "You created people sick, and now that you've realized that you created a bunch of people sick, you are now commanding them to do well, without at any point taking responsibility for your part, which was significant in the creation of this problem. You injected a lot of people with this disease, and now that you're realizing that that disease was not the panacea you thought it was, now you're interested in curing it 10 to 20 years after the fact." Moving on.
All right. CSJ argues that a generation of young men are facing far worse outcomes than young women in education and beyond, falling further behind by virtually every yardstick, while changing social attitudes leave them feeling isolated.
Yeah, and
The
who
phenomenon was highlighted by Don.
Go ahead.
Hold on.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just want to.
Yeah.
The
Finish.
phenomenon was highlighted by Adolescence, an award-winning drama that told the story of Jamie, a 13-year-old boy who's fallen into the online misogynistic world of the so-called men.
Oh, fuck you so
Didn't we
much.
talk
Fuck
about
you.
that?
Mm-mm.
Did we talk about that briefly?
I thought we did. I remember suggesting a bunch of articles on it, but
yeah.
I don't know if we actually got to them or not. But back on topic. Guys, you mentioned up at the top of this article, you mentioned in the title, that you are highlighting the problem that men are both seen as either pathetic or dangerous. And I realize that you like Adolescence because it basically parrots your ideology back at you. But Adolescence was explicitly a demonizing propaganda piece, both to men and boys in general, but also to anyone who gives a fuck about men, as individuals or as a cast. I know you think adolescence was this new and innovative thing, but all it really did was demonize what is now referred to as inceldom, but used to be just referred to as the geek or virgin card. All you've really done there is demonize people like the manosphere, which includes people like myself who are men's rights advocates. And I'm curious how you think you can solve this problem without addressing the men's rights issues at the bottom of it. How? Why is it that the idea of desiring a woman's virginity is seen as misogynistic, but instead of even being that neutral with boys and men, not only is being a virgin a problem with boys and men, but you need a thought-terminating cliche term like incel in order to fucking demonize them and their lack of ability to get sex. Bearing in mind also that the guy in adolescence was like 15, and yes, I know, in reality, people tend to start having sex as soon as they possibly can, which includes people who are like 16, 17. But do you not think it's weird that the first thing the female bully in adolescence thought to call him was incel when he was 15? Or actually, I don't even know if he was that old. I think he might have been like 13 or 14. In which case, what in the fuck are you playing at? Because even most 13 and 14-year-olds are probably not having sex yet. I know, again, like, I'm more willing to indulge the reality that people who are 16 at least probably want to be having sex with people who are around their same age. But if I'm right in that the main character of adolescence was younger than that, why and how the hell is being an incel at the age of like 13 or 14 a problem? Most people should be virgins at 13 or 14 because most people at the age of 13 or 14 have not finished going through puberty yet. Moving on.
Okay. The poll found that 3/5, 57% of people felt that the media tended to portray men at extremes as either wimpy or excessively masculine. More than double the 25% who disagreed with that proposition. A similar 57% said that male role models in popular culture were less masculine than those in past generations. 2/3, 66%, said that the boys lacked proper role models across pop culture.
Yes, that is obviously true. At least partially the fault of social justice as an ideology in the first place. At least partially the fault of third-wave intersectional feminism. Granted, traditionalism in many ways doesn't do much better in today's day and age in this regard, because you're only a man if you do enough things, according to a lot of traditionalism and extremely just gynocentric normie bullshit. But, yeah, social justice created entire generations of culture, entire generations of media that thought that men were either stupid and pathetic or dangerous and malignant, leaving only the most hyper-feminine of men alone to embody positive masculinity. And again, a lot of the time, and personally as a gay man, I find this absolutely insufferable, but a lot of the time, the way that you portray a man as a positive figure in 2025 is by making him as unmasculine and pro-feminine as possible. Again, I will offer up the example of Billy Kaplan from Agatha All Along, despite the fact that he was a fairly well-written character, and that's why I'm using him and not some of the worst examples. Because a large part of the problem with wokeness is the explicit anti-meritocracy shit. The deliberate, we have to make things unbeautiful, unmeritocratic, undesirable as much as possible to break people of the social construct of meritocracy. But even in cases of good media, like Agatha All Along, and yes, I consider Agatha All Along to actually be pretty good, all things considered, the way that you portray a male character as being sympathetic is by making him as feminine and unmasculine as possible. And again, Billy is one of the better examples. There are infinitely worse ones, like, say, Orville, or rather Norville from Velma, or any of the male characters in Daniel Kibblesmith's New Warriors, or
Got Fred.
yeah, although Fred goes more in the dangerous than pathetic category. Although again, a lot of times they're double dipping. There are a lot of cases where media will explicitly portray a man as both pathetic and dangerous, and sometimes he's dangerous because of how pathetic he is, because he's compensating for something. And again, in the many annals of Orange Man Bad that have come out since 2015, there's this idea that he is both dangerous and pathetic because he's dangerous, and dangerous because he is pathetic, and so on. Moving on.
It feels like a headache about to happen.
Oh dear.
When I was just like, just with like how what I mean is like what you were saying. That just feels like a massive headache to try and like understand that. That's what I meant. I didn't say I was having a headache. I was just saying.
Oh, okay. I was worried a little bit there. Anyway, moving on.
I could tell. Yeah, for being a cold emissary of winter, you are a big old softy.
I care about things that are mine, and my friends are definitely in the category of things that are mine. Hence the murderous possessivism with regards to my friends. People don't fuck with things that are mine unless they want to die screaming in a pool of their own blood.
Alright, when asked an open-ended question about which characteristics they would enjoy seeing in male characters on film and TV, 57% said honesty, respect, and family values, substantially higher than any other attribute. David Gandy, one of the world's most successful male models, said, I noticed when my daughter started watching Peppa Pig how the father is treated as a bungling fool who gets it wrong, while the mom gets everything right. I like to empower my girls and teach them about powerful women and what they have achieved, but men are just as important, and we have to shout about what's being achieved by them too.
Good for you, sir. And yes, and again, this problem is older than social justice, or older than wokeness being as pervasive as it is, because I grew up in the late 90s and early 2000s, and I can still think of a handful of examples, like I mentioned before, that happened long before the massive advent of social justice. And that's why I don't particularly think that family values traditionalism is going to be a meaningful antidote to this issue, because a lot of extremely gynocentric traditionalists still think that it is a woman's place to be the moral anchor for her husband or boyfriend, and it is the man's place to provide for and protect his woman instead of ever asserting his own self-interest. And I'm sorry, but men should be able to occasionally assert aspects of their self-interest without being seen as bad people. It shouldn't be a man serves everyone but himself, and everyone serves themselves except the men. That's not the right way around. Yes, I know the traditional thing is women and children first, but that does at least imply that men should have a turn eventually once all the women and children are taken care of. And a lot of traditionalists in today's day and age seem to alter women and children first to women and children only, and that's a fucking problem, regardless of social justice. Anyway, moving on.
there. Baroness Nikki Morgan, the former culture secretary and now chair of the Advertising Standards Authority, said, "If people only ever heard about misogyny, sexual assaults, and violence by men towards women, no doubt it's going to affect how boys are seen. How people are portrayed in the media undoubtedly shapes society's view of them. The challenge has been getting online platforms to accept their publishers with responsibility for content in a way that TV, radio, cinema, newspapers, and magazines accepted decades ago."
I will put an asterisk here because, in general, I avoid coming to the conclusion that media is a brainwashing tool. I will put an exception here, though, because this is the difference between there being many tropes and many ways that those tropes can interact versus every piece of media essentially doing a variation on the same trope, because it is significantly different when a particular trope is portrayed as unilaterally the case. When there are multiple tropes all coexisting in the same culture, then people are more than capable of differentiating between one trope and another trope. But when all the relevant pieces of media agree on the same trope or set of tropes, then it becomes a problem. Like I mentioned at the top, I think the Homer Simpson effect is a large part of why a lot of women were surprised when men show hidden depths that happen to be slightly different than women's hidden depths. Like when men think about the Roman Empire, or when men imagine themselves essentially taking the John McClane role in a Die Hard scenario when they daydream. It's just a simple matter of, you can have the occasional bumbling husband and like morally and intellectually upstanding wife, but when every piece of media, fictional or otherwise, seems to portray it being a man's job to serve his wife and a wife's job not to serve her husband or be equal to her husband, but to explicitly almost act as a surrogate mother for her husband, like Lois does with Peter in Family Guy, or like Marge does with Homer in The Simpsons, or like Wanda does with Cosmo in Fairly Odd Parents, or like Maddie does with Jack in Danny Phantom. And there's a reason I bring up those examples, not just because I'm a millennial and those are the easiest examples to bring to mind, but I mention this because as much as social justice is partly to blame for making this problem infinitely worse and infinitely more pervasive and infinitely more unilateral, the 80s and 90s had this problem for a very, very long time, even without the machinations of social justice. It's this idea that men are demons if they're not held under a woman's thumb, and women are hyper competent and hyper moral, and therefore we don't need to teach them how to be responsible people. They'll just figure that out on their own. Another millennial example would be the way Hermione was portrayed in the Harry Potter movies, to the point that they even gave competent dynamics from the other characters in the books to Hermione. The obvious sufferer of this issue is Ron, because they basically stripped Ron of all of his competence from the books to turn him into the token silly, awkward ginger kid. And meanwhile, they gave the majority of that competence over to Hermione. Now, I like Hermione Granger both in the books and in the movies, even though I think Harry Potter is a shitty franchise on its own terms. But this again shows that this is not a new problem. This has been a problem for a very, very long time. And it was the case even before social justice had any say in the matter. But let's not beat around the bush. Social justice made the problem infinitely worse, not only because they advocated that it was moral to universalize this trope, but that they gave the trope moral and intellectual backing that they taught to art school students. And then those art school students wrote those stories into everything they touched. And hence the degradation of every franchise from Scooby-Doo to Doctor Who, and so on. Moving on.
Neil Brand, a playwright, composer of film scores and Radio 4 film critic, said, "There is a sense that men and boys are growing up with a society that is disempowering them. I think cinema has led this charge, even if it's only reflecting what society is doing. Feminism and the hashtag #MeToo movement of the past 20 or 30 years has been incredibly important and necessary. What it has meant is that the less able and less socially responsible writers and filmmakers have gone for the obvious story. If you're talking about women being empowered, which is that the men then have to lose that power and that the balance can't be struck between the two. Somehow or other, it requires shitty men for women to be shown achieving what it is they should be achieving."
And again, I think this is softening the blow significantly. It's not just that media is disempowering men, and it's not just because of social justice or wokeness, although again, social justice and wokeness made the problem infinitely worse by giving moral and intellectual backing to this idea. But even before the days of social justice, and even during the period of so-called traditionalism, there were still cases of this. Now, mind you, back in the day, there was a little bit of the problem going the other way. I look at Lucy and Ricky in I Love Lucy. Very often, Ricky had to act as the responsible one and clean up his wife's silly messes. But at the very least, since the 70s and 80s, since round about the time that Cheers started, and Will and Grace and The Nanny and Family Matters, and just they're basically, since at the bare minimum the early 80s, this trope basically inverted and has stayed inverted for the last 30 years, regardless of the machinations of feminism, although again, it made it worse. Also, society doesn't just disempower boys, it frequently hates and has contempt for them. And I think it's the hatred and contempt that we can mostly blame on ideologies like intersectional feminism or social justice or wokeness. Because a lot of men didn't mind characters like Jack Fenton or Homer Simpson or Peter Griffin, as long as they knew they were still capable of earning respect and earning a lack of contempt in society. But thanks in large part to patriarchy theory, that men be so stupid and women have to clean up their mess thing has now metastasized into men are stupid and evil, and women are oppressed by having to solve their shit. And that's the level at which social justice came online. Moving on.
Alright. There we go, Mark. So this is originally from the Wrap.com. Leslie Headland is forging ahead with the first stories amid industry's rollback and what really happened with the Acolyte. Office of the filmmaker's shoot to midnight production banner aims to elevate underrated female voices. This is written by Adam Chetwood, published November 20th, 2025.
People don't despise Leslie Headland because she's a woman. They despise her because she's shit at her job. And because she almost, well, no, I can't even say almost single-handedly, because like 80% of the problem there has to be placed at the feet of Kathleen Kennedy. Or as I like to call her, Darth Kenneteus the Incompetent. But that's neither here nor there. But yeah, people don't despise Leslie Headland. First of all, they don't despise her as a person for the most part. Second of all, insofar as they do despise her, they despise her because she is a terrible, terrible artist. And apparently no one in the editing bay or in the production staff or in the writing staff was able, ready, or willing to tell her that some of her ideas were bad. Although, again, to be fair, I think we have discussed before how Leslie Headland's original instincts were actually pretty half decent. It was Kathleen Kennedy that insisted that Leslie Headland self-insert as much as possible without any regard to, again, because I will maintain this, self-inserts are not a problem. It's just if you insert yourself, one, it helps to have a self that's worthy of insertion in the fucking first place, with skills, talents, etc. But two, it really helps your self-insert be not insufferable if you're willing to be aware of and cognizant of and portraying of your failings or your quirks or your idiosyncrasies as well as your skills and talents. And by the way, another thing that would help self-inserts, find a way for the character to learn information in universe, i.e. by operating by in-universe logic, instead of basically giving them the meta power to read the fucking script. Because a lot of really shitty writers from the social justice branded art schools and shit seem to regard a character being intelligent as we need to give the character meta powers and allow them to read ahead in the script.
You know what? Actually, okay. I know we've talked about it a few times when we talked about the Acolyte.
Mm-hmm.
And we might be able to talk about. I do want just to kind of pad out a little bit of time because we're almost through with all this.
Mm-hmm.
What we would have done with the Acolyte, I'd have to do brief research and check what any ideas she had originally that she's mentioned, but we'll get to that later, obviously, when we're still going through this. But anything else, or do you want me to continue?
No, go ahead. Move on.
All right. Leslie Headland knows firsthand just how significantly Hollywood has changed over the last 2 decades. She first broke out as an indie filmmaker with a distinct voice, writing and directing an adaptation of her Raucous,
I think.
Raucous.
Yeah, Raucous.
What does that mean?
It means like high energy and comedic. Kind of like hyperactive. With a little bit of, it sometimes can also include things like raunchiness a little bit.
Okay.
Or like blunt, like lowest common denominator humor. Sometimes is also what it means.
Okay. Her Raucous play Bachelorette in 2012, and following that up with the R-rated Alison Brie / Jason Sudeikis rom-com Sleeping with Other People in 2025, both indies that found audiences at Sundance. Then in 2019, at the height of the studio's spending bonanza on streaming, she co-created the twisty dark comedy Netflix series Russian Doll with Natasha Lyonne and Amy Poehler, directing half the season and picking up Emmy nominations.
Okay, aside from the fact that a lot of those don't actually sound very funny, which is another issue, why would you give a person who's mostly known for writing comedies a serious, like, science fantasy drama?
You know what? I'm sorry, Don. Not to cut you off. Kind of playing devil's advocate a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I could see that, given some other people that have done mostly comedies and yet have also created some really like dark and serious or like impressive, like more serious like works.
Right, but a lot of what those examples have in common is as much faith as they had in the comedian's ability to have more range, the studio still gave it a lot of studio oversight. Whereas the Acolyte's biggest problem, it seems, is they basically gave Leslie Headland a blank check to do whatever she wanted, and then Kathleen Kennedy came in there and refuted Leslie Headland's good fan service instincts and told her explicitly to put as much of her identity and her self-insertion into the story as possible, which is possibly the single worst piece of writing advice you could give a inexperienced writer, creative, or director in the history of writing, which is, again, why I blame at least like 70 or 80% of what's wrong with The Acolyte, not on Leslie Headland, but on Kathleen Kennedy. Because, as the old saying goes, once is a coincidence, twice is a pattern, 3 times is enemy action. And everything Kathleen Kennedy touches seems to be fucked up in precisely the same way. And I'm sorry, but I do not have anything like the faith in coincidence it would take me to believe that that was all accidental or incidental. It may just be that Kathleen Kennedy wanted there to be a third wave intersectional feminist subversive neo-Hegelian crap fest in everything she got a hold of, and she mandated it from the top down, it seems. Moving on.
And then she made a Star Wars show. I think we're in a really interesting in between place right now. Headland told the wrap of the current marketplace as she continues to develop and produce projects through her Shoot to Midnight banner. The company's ethos was initially built on elevating unacknowledged or underrepresented voices in dark comedy. But as the market got more challenging after COVID, Shoot to Midnight became about crafting relationships and seeking out female writers, specifically television writers, who wanted to get in and sort of break into this industry.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but someone should have been holding your hand to make sure you didn't make any stupid mistakes. And that's not even a lack of talent thing. Even great directors need someone to occasionally hold their hand. The freaking poster child for this is, of course, George Lucas. A lot of what made the original trilogy work as well as it did is other people's influence on the original trilogy. And as we saw with the prequels, George Lucas, thinking he was the secret sauce the whole time, really kind of screwed up his own brand. And it's not even an isolated incident. The same thing happened with Patty Jenkins in Wonder Woman 2. The same thing happened with Taika Waititi in between Thor Ragnarok and Thor Love and Thunder. Even really smartly creative people occasionally need a team that is willing to curb some of the more indulgent and self-aggrandizing tendencies and actually focus on, that's a really good idea, how do we best actualize it so that it actually works the way the creative intended to work. Another example of this, I suspect, is James Cameron in everything related to the Avatar franchise. It seems like 90% of the problem with the Avatar movies is someone gave James Cameron a blank check and told him to go nuts and never decided to check back in and make sure that he wasn't just shoving several $1 million directly up his own anus, which he seems to. Moving on.
That's been a challenge recently. Have decided acknowledging the rollback in DEI and female-led projects at major studios. That's the type of development project that I think people are a bit more wary about when they were in the 2018-2019 era. Indeed, Headland's original Star Wars series, The Acolyte, was caught in crosshairs with a black female lead, played by Amanda Steinberg. The show was canceled after one season, a decision that didn't catch Headland completely off guard, but still stung.
Okay. Again, fixing the fucking straw man here. No one cares that the actress was black or female. No one cares that you are a lesbian, Leslie. No one cares about your identity. What people have a problem with is the pseudo-intellectual art school mentality informed by neo-Hegelianism and the Frankfurt School that says those identities should have political strings attached to them. And it's those political and ideological strings that make for shitty writing, because those political and ideological strings explicitly think standards of merit in art or standards of merit in storytelling are harmful social constructs, TM, and we have to take the moral role of a parent and deprogram all the children of this harmful delusion of meritocracy by making something as explicitly anti-meritocratic as possible. That's the issue. It's not the identities that this ideology tries to use as human shields. It's the ideology that uses these identities as human shields that's the issue. I am gay. I am crippled. I am a religious minority. And particularly relevant here, Leslie, I have been a practicing occultist and witch to some degree or other for 19 years, which includes my entire adult life, being as I am only 30. So, I
You are
should in theory have been the target audience for the Acolyte, even by social justice standards. And there are shows, contemporary shows at that I really, really like, that focus on witchy themes. First and foremost among them is Agatha All Along. The reason, however, that I like Agatha All Along to a very defensive degree, and I think that The Acolyte was a complete and utter destructive clusterfuck that contains everything wrong with entertainment in today's day and age, is because one of these was actually interested in pleasing the audience and in telling a good story with interesting characters, and for the love of all that is holy and unholy, doing so with proper aesthetics and style. And the other of these was convinced that aesthetics, style, and fan service are either stupid or evil or both, and went out of its way to deliberately do the opposite of all of the above. That is why, for example, that 20 years from now, The Ballad of the Witch's Road, all like 3 or 4 or 5 versions of it, will be a classic, and Agatha All Along will probably become a cult Halloween classic in its own right. Whereas The Acolyte and its power of many only exists to be derided and mocked. There's a reason why I will still to this day often go out of my way to sing The Ballad of the Witch's Road. But every time someone even mentions the phrase, the power of many, the entire internet cringes in a mixture of contempt and horror. Moving on. Unless we lost Brainstormer for a bit, which we may have done. I am assuming he probably left to use the restroom or something. But long story short, the reason why Jack Schaefer was able to improve in between WandaVision and Agatha All Along, and Leslie Headland basically nuked her career with The Acolyte, is because despite the negative reaction to WandaVision, Jack Schaefer did not go argle florgle blorgle my toxic fandom. She acknowledged that there were errors, or at least things the fans didn't really like in WandaVision, and she wanted to make something worthy on its own merits of a positive fan response. And as a result, as imperfect as Agatha All Along can be, especially in episodes 6 and 9, it was a massive improvement over WandaVision, and, more to the point, created something that was intrinsically valuable on its own merits as well. Which is important when you try to make something. You shouldn't make it for ideological reasons or political reasons or moral reasons, and you shouldn't even use it as a means to stroke your own ego. You should be striving to create something that is good on its own merits and will survive after you, if possible.
Hi.
A scenario in which Jack Schaefer was largely capable of doing, and Leslie Headland is the poster child for doing the opposite of. Moving on, when brainstorming gets back.
Hi.
Yeah. Sorry, I had to fill a little bit of the dead air by reiterating the point. Also, I didn't bring up meritocracy as much as I should have in the bit, so I was clarifying. Anyway, moving on.
I'm not surprised by the cancellation. I think I was surprised by the swiftness of it and the publicness of it. She said, I was surprised by how it was handled. Once I was getting particular phone calls about the reaction and the criticism and the viewership, I felt like, okay, the writing's on the wall for sure. But Helen said she learned something vital about the Acolyte kerfuffle as she saw online creators, many of whom she'd followed for years before she made a Star Wars show of her own, rack up views and thus ad revenue for their lengthy reviews and recaps about the show. As she looks ahead, she thinks Hollywood is misunderstanding how exactly those models work.
No, Leslie, I am fairly competent and confident when I say this. You are the one who misunderstood what your assignment was. You are the one who created something bad, and therefore it was treated badly. Even the people who would prefer to demonize Agatha All Along were largely unsuccessful in doing so, because anyone who paid attention to Agatha All Along could understand what Agatha All Along was doing. But unlike Agatha All Along, which managed to succeed despite its haters, you were a poster child for said haters. That's why. And this is the thing. As much as I agree with a hatred of social justice and wokeness, with people like Nerdrotic, Mueller, etc., I do think that I have a little razor that I use on them when these things happen, which is the more they go into detail about the specific errors with the thing, the more likely it is to actually be bad. But the more the review consists of not observations but questions that would be plainly obvious to anyone that was actually meaningfully engaging with the material in question, the more likely it is that the thing in question is actually pretty good and they weren't prepared for it to be good. And a perfect example here is they were able to do blow-by-blows of the Acolyte because every successive detail of the Acolyte was shit. But when trying to demonize Agatha in the same way, they were reduced to just asking questions. And they weren't questions that the show didn't answer, or that the show didn't explicitly reference, or that you wouldn't have picked up intuitively from watching the thing. And that's the difference between when Mahler and Gary and Geeks and Gamers and Little Platoon and company do the long form story. And this is why I pay the most attention to Little Platoon, because even if I disagree with some of his arguments, like I did with his review of Multiverse of Madness, I will not, by watching a Little Platoon video, get a analysis that doesn't go into detail, even if I disagree with some of it. Whereas, for the most part, if the show in question is better than Gary or Mueller or any of the other EFAP crew think it is, they will just develop a blind spot of selective ignorance and make their entire review about questions rather than examining the material. Because the more they examine the material in detail, the more likely they are to actually be engaged with it, and therefore, if they go into detail on a negative review, you can tell they actually were watching it, and you can also tell that it is actually bad. But in the case of something like Agatha, they don't have enough bad material to create a demonizing review, and so they develop selected blind spots and ask questions rather than examine mistakes. Moving on.
The content that is being put out by the streamers or the studios is being snatched up by these other creators, and so commentaries, synopses, live videos, all of the ways that these creators make money through viewer base, ad revenues, and their Patreons. There's a lot of money to be made, she said, and by the way, have at it, get your coin 100%. But it revealed to me that there is a misunderstanding between the studios and that engagement. They think of it as fandom, and in ways it is, but studios use it almost like this focus group.
No, in fact, the problem in society is the exact opposite. They refuse to use the internet as the massive focus group it is and actually do things that the fans would prefer they do. And they instead double down on the ivory tower Ivy League post Frankfurt School neo-Hegelian nonsensory that is social justice, and that's why things like Velma, The Acolyte, Rings of Power, etc. go on for multiple seasons usually, and things like Sonic the Hedgehog, or even something like Hazbin Hotel, which, and this is the thing, even though there's a lot of thematic overlap in something like Hazbin Hotel and something like She-Hulk or The Acolyte, Hazbin Hotel is much more positively regarded because Vivian Madrano does not consider there to be an ideological reason to be anti-meritocratic. She still wants to tell a good story that is good on its own merits, and she wants to put in effort, and she wants to put in aesthetic, and she wants to put in style and substance and all the other good things that an actual creative impulse necessitates. Whereas in the case of something like She-Hulk or Velma or The Acolyte, there is an ideological presupposition that meritocracy itself is bad and we have to deprogram the public from holding to it. That's why, despite the fact that the director of the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise was doing what studios actually should do and accepting meaningful criticism as and when it is made in good faith, he was demonized by the intelligentsia class because you don't want to encourage fandom. Fandom is toxic, derp. And that's why I will defend Jack Schaefer when she made Agatha All Along, even if I don't like what she did in WandaVision, because she actually interpreted the majority of that criticism in good faith and adjusted Agatha All Along accordingly so that instead of demonizing fandom by saying Argle, Florgle, Blorgle, my Nazis, Argle, Florgle, Blorgle, toxic fandom, she simply said to herself, what can I do that would make that fandom more likely to regard me in a positive light? Which is a much better standard than if you don't like it, don't watch it, / if you don't like it, you're a Nazi. Which is the thing you are currently doing. The internet is essentially a massive focus group, but in actuality, the biggest problem with Hollywood in today's day and age is they don't use that focus group, even if they should. They don't actually listen to what the fans want. They are more interested in courting what academia considers to be the morally, politically, or sociologically correct thing, and demonizing and belittling and pathologizing every fan who has a problem with that. Moving on.
All right. The content that is being put, I read that. Ultimately, Headland thinks we could be moving towards a world where the content being made about Star Wars will be more culturally impactful than actual Star Wars.
Well, that's just true in general, because for the most part, people have no further institutional respect for Hollywood or institutional respect for the mainstream media. And YouTube is a lot more populistic in that it is the audience of YouTube. For the most part, there's fuckery with the algorithm to be considered, and there's institutional bias to be considered on places like YouTube. But for the most part, when a YouTuber becomes successful, they become successful because the audience has decided that their content is worth pursuing. Unlike in Hollywood, where if a fan has a problem and criticizes that problem in good faith with regards to Hollywood content, 9 times out of 10 they will be called haters or they will simply be called toxic fandom. And that's why Hollywood has no respect from the actual public anymore. It's the same problem as political institutions more generally in today's day and age. People have forgotten that populism and democracy are essentially the same thing. They are literally the same word in 2 different languages, populus in Latin and demos in Greek. So instead of acquiescing to populism like they should, and in so doing also acquiesce to standards of merit, they demonize populism as a dog whistle for various forms of fascism or censorious authoritarianism, even though it is they who are doing the censorious authoritarianism. And that's why nobody respects Hollywood or the mainstream media or the institutions anymore, because those institutions are out of touch and explicitly and implicitly lacking in merit, whereas YouTubers, however captured they may be, or however astroturfed they may sometimes be, are at least the audience being able to choose who they will and will not listen to. It's why people like Asmongold or Penguin Zero or the EFAP crew, as much as I have my issues with them, are more impactful to the discourse than Hollywood, because they are simply more reflective of the reality on the ground, or at least the way people actually think, than Hollywood and the institutions are. You could resolve this by getting with the fucking times and realizing that it's not 1960 anymore, but Hollywood is very pathologically resistant to doing that. And so YouTube will continue, and other populist mechanisms of media sharing will continue to become more reflective of and more influential over public opinion than the much vaunted institutions with the authority. Moving on.
All right. So it's like an interview. When you first launched Shoot to Midnight, what was the ultimate goal in your head? Why did you start your own production company? The initial instinct was really simplistic, which is unacknowledged or unrepresented voices in dark comedy. It felt like Russian Doll was the first big Shoot to Midnight project that was not just something I had made, and so it felt like such a successful and fruitful collaboration that it became the blueprint for me in terms of what to look for moving forward when developing projects. Shortly after Russian Doll in 2019-ish, right before COVID, I was lucky enough to sign an overall deal with 20th Television. I had a key hire, which was my former assistant, who then became a creative executive and is now an EP of development and production. But because a lot of that overall deal was about me creating a Star Wars series, and that's essentially all encompassing, a lot of the development that we were seeking out and responded to were projects that I couldn't come on to as director. That was interesting because it started to become more about a producerial voice and less about a production company that was supporting simply what I was doing.
I don't really have a comment there. It's not
Anything
really
more?
germane to anything. Moving forward.
During COVID, there were a lot of projects that were picked up and greenlit into development, and it was very exciting. And we'd get to all of these creative places, and then we found the market to be really difficult. With 20th, you essentially have 2 to 3 platforms to pitch to, which is a pretty narrow bullseye to hit. So COVID plus the strikes, the bullseye got smaller and smaller, and it became about crafting relationships and seeking out female writers, specifically television writers, who wanted to get in and sort of break into the industry. So we had the opportunity during a very tough time to continue to foster new talent, and specifically young women who didn't have the tried and true go-to market. And everybody's like, yes, absolutely. It was much more of a, can you take a chance with somebody who has a great idea and a lot of talent? That's the type of development project that I think people are a bit more wary about than they were in the 2018-2019 era.
Well, that's the thing, Leslie. Why were you not interested in anyone with talent? Why were you explicitly looking for women with talent? Why were you more interested in representing women with talent than you were representing anyone with talent? Because there are YouTubers who make fan films and fan fiction who are infinitely more talented than anyone on the Acolyte staff. I can say this with 150% certainty. But you were more interested in ideological and identity conformity than you were in talent. And as the old saying goes, you get what you pay for, i.e., if you look for talent as the universal thing, if you look for talent as the thing to focus on, you will get talent above all else. But if you prioritize identity and collectivism and conformity over talent, or even demonize talent because of some art school nonsense, then you will get things other than talent primarily. And I'm not even saying there's nothing good or nothing that couldn't be written better in The Acolyte. In fact, many of the ideas in The Acolyte have already been done better in other shows, as I have frequently alluded to, or other pieces of media. But you didn't even rise to the level of that most basic common denominator of those ideas, because you were more interested in indulging your ego and indulging your ideology and indulging your identity instead of telling a good story that made sense on its own internally consistent logic, let alone could stand on its own merits. And that's why people will, 20 years from now, remember Agatha all along for, at the very least, the Ballad of the Witch's Road, but they will only remember The Acolyte in order to mock it, because there is so much about The Acolyte that is deliberately and avoidably shit on purpose. Moving on.
I bet there was a lot of whiplash too. Rush Doll was so great and unique, but does that even get made in 2025? Oh, not at all. I came in on 20th television property, a known IP, and I pitched that at the top of the year, and it was a great show, great concept, a lot of support internally for it, and I was very grateful for that, but it ended up going a different way. Sorry.
You're good. I had to turn off my camera because I have an itch and I didn't want to scratch it on camera.
But it ended up going a different way, and there wasn't a pickup or green light to pilot, and it did feel like, gosh, a half-hour black comedy with a female lead who's dealing with existential problems, just that bread and butter that I developed both with my films and then also with Russian Doll. That's a project that at the height of streaming would have sold immediately, especially if it had major talent attached to it or a big studio behind it.
Yeah, but here's the thing. You didn't prioritize creating something worthy of a bigger platform. You prioritized getting a bigger platform and assumed that people would just consume it by means of inertia instead of creating something that you genuinely feel is worthy of being included on a larger platform and letting the audience make up their own fucking minds. And by the way, letting the audience make up their own fucking minds means, at least partially, that if you fuck up, if you create something that the audience does not like, do not demonize them. Strive to learn how to do better on your own terms. And that's why I will have no truck with all this toxic fandom bullshit. Because instead of actually looking at the criticisms on their own merits, you are more interested in assuming that everyone you don't like is just hating on you for no reason, let alone for the reason that you didn't create something good enough on its own merits. Moving along.
Alright, what specifically is different about the market now? It really does come down to not really a resistance to a pickup as much as in resistance to engaging on development. I think that the streaming bubble is now bursting, and I think that started around COVID. It just started to feel like the amount of money that was going to have to be spent on 8 to 10 episodes of television, that business model dwindled. It started to become something like, well, what are we pivoting to? There hasn't been something that's been ushered in to take its place. I think we're in a very interesting in-between place right now.
Leslie, if that whole screed just now were true, then Has-Been Hotel would not exist. The reason why Vivian Medrano is infinitely more successful than you is because she was interested in creating a story that was good on its own merits and caring about her characters and giving them multiple dimensions of writing and caring about aesthetic and caring about style and caring about things that would get the audience's attention on their own merits. The reason why Agatha All Along and Has-Been Hotel are more successful than you is because they deserve to be, because they have more merit than the Acolyte did. I don't want to be harsh on you, my dear lady, but that is the main reason why. The reason why Vivian Medrano created one of the most successful Amazon Prime IPs possible, and the reason why you made Disney Plus want to shoot itself is in both cases because Vivian Medrano has merit, and the story that she tells has merit on its own terms, regardless of her ego, whereas what you created has almost no merits, and in many cases very explicitly goes against the very concept of merit. And the same is true, although to obviously a lesser extent, with Jack Schaefer. She created something that could stand on its own terms, at least in the case of Agatha All Along. As I have said many times, I think WandaVision was a much worse show. But she improved, and she didn't demonize the fan base for getting the criticism that she got with WandaVision. And as a result, she was able to, for the most part, create something better than WandaVision when she made Agatha All Along. I am curious if you are ever, assuming you ever get a show again, which is unlikely given that you basically torched your own career with The Acolyte, but if you ever get a show again, will you look back on some of the criticisms of The Acolyte and internalize at least some of them and strive to make a better show as the end result? Or will you just continue to double down on your own ego and ideology and never create something even as good as The Acolyte again? This is your choice, Leslie. But people like Vivian Medrano and people like Jack Schaefer were willing to accept at least some of the criticism that came their way. You are apparently unwilling to accept any and are far more willing to attribute any criticism you get to haters and toxic fans instead of you made a shitty product that people correctly identified as being shitty. Moving on.
All right. So how do you forge ahead with Shoot to Midnight, especially at a time when studios frankly are pulling back on female-led and diverse projects. I completely agree. I did start to feel that when my Star Wars show came out in 2024, I remember thinking, "Oh gosh, I wish it wasn't coming out in an election year." I think that's contributed to the move away from DEI hires, and I would say we are not a company that is interested myopically in that. As a queer woman, and my other hires are women, which it just means that it's my community. I am queer, so I just see the world through my specific lens, and that means just doing different things.
Okay, Leslie, my darling. Women and minorities with actual talent don't require explicit diversity hiring, don't require affirmative action, because people with actual talent can get a position on their merits. I've already gone through my identity categories. I am gay, I am physically disabled, with spastic diaplegic cerebral palsy, and I am a religious minority. I am a practicing polytheistic occultist. I, however, do not like ESG and DEI because I would prefer to get a job, if I am to get a job, on my merits as an individual, not as a interchangeable cog in the hive mind of crippledness, gayness, or religious minorityness. And I'm pretty sure that's true of just about everyone of a diverse background with actual talent. The only people that actually benefit from ESG and DEI are people who think that the only reason they've ever suffered at all is because of their identity, and who have, as a result, a chip on their shoulder about their identity, rather than prioritize the ability to look at themselves and go, do I have merits? And if not, how do I get them? That is the healthy way of approaching this. Instead of blaming everything you've ever done, anything bad that's ever happened to you, on, well, the world just hates me because of my identity, you can look at yourself and go, if I want good things in my life, I'm going to have to earn them, and I'm going to have to earn them by being of some kind of merit. Moving on.
There's a lot of unfair vitriol about the Acolyte online, and for it to be the first Star Wars show to be publicly canceled, Lucasfilm had never done that before. Really, the whole thing with the Acolyte was always a major risk. It was a new part of the timeline. It was all new characters. It was part of the lore where you couldn't use a stormtrooper. You didn't have the reference of the Andor, but all the iconography and all of those visual references are original trilogy references, and our references were the High Republic novels and the publishing initiative, and then the prequels specifically with the lightsabers. I also think that any gripes creatively with the show are completely valid. That's people's reaction. It's usually their reaction to their own reaction. But like I said, the show is always a risk. But like I said, the show is always a risk. It's the old adage, the first one through the wall is the bloodiest. And this is very much to coming back to your question about the company. It was very much, let's shoot for the sky. Let's just go for it. Love my show, that it was wonderful, and honestly, the designers that worked on the show are more responsible for it because of what Star Wars is. Creating the world is honestly harder than creating the narrative and the dialogue and the characters. That's stuff I've done. It's more hiring the right people, and all those people were brilliant.
Okay, Leslie, here's the thing. You weren't actually writing in a blank slate. You weren't actually writing at a point in the continuity that had no ties to the other parts of the continuity. And as a result, you done fucked up. For example, you had Ki-Adi Mundi existing in the in the High Council chamber, even though Kiadimundi's race are not quite long-lived enough for that to be the case. You also showed an older, decrepitified version of Darth Plagueis at the end of episode 8 of The Acolyte. The problem there being, if this show takes place a century prior to the prequels, like you are saying, the Sith Lord at the time should either be Darth Tenebris, who was Plagueis' master, or potentially even the one before that, who I don't know off the top of my head. But regardless, if you wanted to include Plagueis, it should not have been an old, decrepified one like we see at the end of The Acolyte. It should have been a much younger, perhaps even teenaged Plagueis. Because while the moons, which is Plagueis' race, do live long enough where including him would have been feasible, because time is still a very much a thing, he wouldn't have been an old man during the events of The Acolyte. He would have potentially still been an apprentice, and maybe even a teenage one at that. So what would have been smart for you to do would have been to understand the continuity of the world you're operating in, and maybe include Darth Tenebris instead of Darth Plagueis, or if you included a Darth Plagueis, perhaps make it a very young one. Moving on.
Okay, hey Don. So there is no official name for the master of Darth Tenebris. It was a male Twi'lek, though. That's basically it.
Okay, but yes, point being, you weren't actually in a continuity neutral portion of the timeline, and therefore you still should have been paying attention to the canon such as it is. Or even, given that you are willing to canonize things like Cortosis in The Acolyte, you actually probably would have benefited a lot if you included things from the EU. Because one of the biggest criticisms that Star Wars fans make about the Disney version is that it decanonized the EU in favor of a new continuity that is infinitely worse than the original EU continuity. So, yeah, you should have been paying attention to continuity and either made a very young Plagueis who was probably still traveling with his master, or a older Darth Tenebris is what you should have done. Also, the issue is, I think, in my understanding of the canon of The Acolyte, such as it is, I think it's fair to say that Hymir was not actually a Sith. I'm reasonably certain that he was just a Dark Jedi, a fallen Dark Jedi. But given that the Acolyte goes back and forth as to whether Hymir is a Sith or not, the other issue that comes to mind with regards to Darth Plagueis and or Darth Tenebris is the rule of fucking two. Because if Hymir is a Sith, like it is implied in The Acolyte, Darth Tenebris should have shown up like Palpatine showed up in Clone Wars after Maul gained enough dark side power to be a challenger to him. If anyone remembers the "you have become a rival" scene, and he should have killed Hymir, if indeed Hymir was a Sith. If he's not, if I'm right, and Hymir was just a Dark Jedi, then why in the fuck were you playing fucking 3-card Monty with the term Sith the entire time? Because the most sensible option is that Hymir is not a Sith, he is a Dark Jedi, in which case the rule of two is not violated. But if Hymir is a Sith, then the rule of two has been fucked.
Jesus Christ. Sorry, this kind of goes on for a bit. No, it'd be cool if we like kind of in this article here and like leave it for next week, like finish it next week. Oh fuck, actually.
Or January, yeah.
Well, let me get the next one then. And alright, because I've been thinking about like how I do the Acolyte. Like, granted, it's just now, like I'm doing it right. Like I haven't had planned it out really.
Mm-hmm.
I don't look too much into the High Republic era because I have not heard too great of things about it.
Mm.
But I mean, going off the base concept we had talked about like a year ago when we were reviewing, or at least talking about the Acolyte, um, was kind of make it more so of like courtly politics, kind of more of a what was the example you'd used, like the Star Wars version of West Wing or something like that.
Yeah, something along those lines.
And the, I mean, obviously to keep in part with the Acolyte thing, that's a bit difficult if we're kind of pivoting towards it being more of like, well, we did talk about like um the cult, right? Like that's what we
Yeah,
call them, or
the cult of the thread could have worked, and similar concepts to the cult of the thread have worked in other media. In particular, the True Knot from Stephen King's Doctor Sleep, or the Secret Circle from the titular Secret Circle. The idea of magical practitioners essentially pooling their resources by binding each other together as a coven is a very old concept. I think even the craft alludes to it to some degree. But the thing that the aforementioned have in common that the Acolyte does not have is it was actually written well and handled well. Another thing of interpreting the Force not as a force but as a thread could have also worked. And again, this concept is another thing that has worked, in particular in the Discovery of Witches TV show, when Diana Bishop is learning about the various threads of witchcraft. Or another example would be the way that the threads of magic work in Warhammer Fantasy. Both of these concepts could be and have been employed elsewhere and done better. And it
okay,
could have been done well in The Acolyte, it just was not.
don't we've talked about ad nauseum how bad the Acolyte is. I'm trying to figure out how we would do it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. But the easiest way to fix the cult of the thread is to take those inspirations and run with them, essentially.
May I?
Go ahead.
Okay. I think again when we first talked about it, I pitched the idea of like when they were doing the ritual thing, it took more from like actual like dance ceremonies. I can't remember. I don't think I made any specifics, but where it was more, they were tapping into more primal power, becoming more not animalistic, but more how to say,
Animistic or shamanic would probably be the best way of going about it.
thank you. That's yeah.
Which again, they've done better even in the Star Wars universe with the Night Sisters, because of course Mother Talzin is the mother of her coven, which is a shamanic role. And
Actually,
I know I'm not the only one to have said this, but I think it might have been better if they had just done the Night Sisters. But again, they could have done the Cult of the Thread as a separate force or a separate mystical cult, but they would have to do so in a way that was not shit in order to make that work.
Hey Don.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to be a care, but may I like finish my idea?
Yes. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
You're fine. I just I was thinking like it could have been a coven. One thing, we could have also involved the Night Sisters and see them like earlier, like what their timeline kind of is at that time, because could have been interesting.
There's a character in the EU that I would have really liked to have seen them canonize, which I forget her name, but it's the woman who taught it's the woman who taught Mother Talzin, and who essentially throughout the course of the Empire period kept the entire Empire off of Dathomir. Single-handedly. I forget the character's name now, but because in the existing canon, Mother Talzin is the most powerful Night Sister we have seen, but in the EU, she was still very powerful, and they did still put her on the same level as Yoda or Palpatine, but there were many other more powerful witches on Dathomir than Mother Talzin.
Alright, moving on.
Mhm.
This is from Vanity Fair. Conservatives think Wicked is a perversion of L. Frank Baum's original books. This is written by Aaron Vander, post November 21st, 2025. The original music. Fucking Christ. Shit. Okay. The original music was apparently acceptable by Brett Cooper, says Cynthia Erivo. And Ariana Grande's whimsical press tour was tinged with self-obsession and elitism. Subheader.
I'm gonna level with you all. I would not have known this article exists if I didn't see John Delarose reacting to it. John Delarose is basically precisely the straw man of a family values conservative that people are always insinuating the rest of us are. And I had to simultaneously fix his commentary and also to some degree play defense for Wicked.
I really just look, I'm gonna be honest, I don't give a shit. Okay. About anything of this. Wicked doesn't interest me. Anyone who's being kind of a dumbass doesn't interest me because we deal with this kind of shit all the fucking time. So what is the point?
Well, the point is that someone has to be a sane person in the room. Otherwise, the stupidity just festers and gets worse. Anyway, moving on.
When the first installment of John M. Chu's Wicked premiered in 2024, online conservatives lambasted it for being too woke. The advocacy group 1 Million Moms even launched a boycott, arguing that the movie contained a tremendous amount of witchcraft and sorcery. Wizard of Oz! Wow, that's surprising.
The movie literally stars witches. I don't understand. Like, it's not as though Wicked at any point hid or shied away from that, nor does the source material, nor does the source material of the source material.
Okay, so now the second film, Wicked for Good, is hitting theaters, and conservative influencers are using new videos of Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo on the film's press tour to revive the trend with a brand new angle. Hollywood has ruined the traditional Wizard of Oz story we know and love. And
no. If that happened, it happened in the 90s with the release of Gregory Maguire's Wicked, and I do not accept that it ruins anything about L. Frank Baum's. It's different. It is different. I will give you that. But as especially fan fiction goes, I find Wicked to be an extremely respectful bit of fan fiction, and I think in many ways it adds to L. Frank Baum's original mythos in ways that I think he would probably approve of.
Again, I don't care.
Yes, your apathy is noted. For the record.
I don't know. I don't know. Well, to be fair, Wizard of Oz never really grabbed me either.
Yeah, this is the difference between us. Wizard of Oz was one of the first movies that got me interested in the idea of movie making itself, because my VHS, which this should tell you how long ago this was one of the it was one of those VHSs that in the like transition period between VHS and DVD had like elements that would be the bonus features of the DVD, like grafted onto the end of the VHS. And so Wizard of Oz was one of the first franchises that I ever got interested in the broader history of in general, but also of the like making of. And ever since then, Wizard of Oz has actually been a very like near and dear franchise to my heart. I actually remember the first time I ever saw the book Wicked, which was on the desk of my teaching aide. In like fifth grade, my aide was reading it. And ever since then, I've at least wanted to get into Wicked. It took me a very long time to get into it, mostly because I couldn't find the audiobook anywhere. But once I did, I got very heavily into it. Around the time that the first Wicked musical adaptation movie was coming out, I finally decided I was going to go hunting for the audiobook and check it out. And it didn't disappoint. There were issues I had with it, but it didn't disappoint. Also, I'm not sure exactly how Wicked subverts the original Wizard of Oz, because the Wizard of Oz, the character, has always been essentially baby's first Orwellian police state. Like it's a G-rated dystopia when you get right down to it. The Emerald City, as ruled over by the wizard, has always been kind of an Orwellian dystopia for like G-rated kids. So Wicked deciding to take that very Orwellian aspect of the wizard and treat it a little bit more seriously doesn't really change anything. The most you could argue is that Wicked the book takes more influence from the 1938 movie than the original book, but even then, there are elements of L. Frank Baum's original mythos, like Lurleen, like the Vinkus or Winkies, like the Quadlings, and so on, that do make like Wheelers and TikTok creatures, that do make appearances in the other L. Frank Baum books, but weren't referenced in the original 1938 movie. So I'm not sure where. Like, obviously, it's somewhat subversive in the sense that it focuses on the villain, but it's not perversive. Those are two very different things. There's nothing inherently perverting about Wicked. It's a little bit subversive in that it focuses on the villain, but so with every story where the villain is given a backstory, it's even remotely sympathetic. Moving on.
Alright. The recent uproar started with the conservative rage-baiting account Libs of TikTok shared a video in which Grande sent love to queer fans. Oz has always been a queer place, a safe place for queer people, for every different color of the rainbow, for everybody. The singer said, "Read the L. Frank Baum books. It's the truth." Okay. Hey, also,
Okay.
I just recently found out that there's a whole book series instead of just one book.
You didn't know that.
I didn't.
I guess because it didn't grab you. Yes. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz is just the first book in the series, which I believe there's like 13 or 15 in the original L. Frank Baum Oz books. And there's also I believe we're up to 4 books now in the Gregory Maguire Oz books. The first one being Wicked, the second one being Son of a Witch, the third one being A Lion Called Burr, and I forget what the fourth one is. But yeah, there are multiple books in the series, both in the L. Frank Baum originals and in the Gregory Maguire Oz books. But yes, I will say this even as a gay dude. I find LGBTism completely insufferable and shit. And I do wish there was a little bit less queer pandering, especially because said queer pandering is remarkably stereotypical and mollycoddling and pitying. And I hate that fucking shit. But as much as I hate the aforesaid focus on queerness and LGBT crap, it must be said that The Wizard of Oz has been a franchise that the queer community, quote unquote, has loved since the 1939 original. There's a reason why it's almost a stereotype for gay people to like musical theater, and of those that do like musical theater, there's a reason why Judy Garland is one of the poster children or one of the poster celebrities for gay people, and that's been the case ever since the 1939 original. So, or 1938 original. But anyway, so yeah, as much as I find the LGBT crap insufferable, and as much as yes, I do wish we could just fucking shut the fuck up about it already. The 10-year of the Oz franchise has always been a little bit fruity, even in the original format. So it's not a new thing, and it's certainly not something that began with Wicked or Ariana Grande or Cynthia Erivo or whatever else the fuck. Moving on.
In response, Brittany Hughes, a conservative influencer who makes videos for Media Research Center, a conservative media nonprofit, said it was a reflection of the narcissistic quacks who inhabit Hollywood. The L. Frank Baum books were written as a fairy tale for children. They were based on his personal life experiences, childhood dreams, and a few family members, she said in one such video. I guarantee you, purple-haired, gender-bending unicorns with made-up pronouns never once crossed his mind. The original novel and the first Wizard of Oz film had nothing at all to do with being queer, and the fact that Hollywood now has to make everything gay doesn't rewrite history.
Okay, most of that I'm actually perfectly on Britney's side with. I will once again highlight that ever since the 1939 original, there has been a lot of fandom and a lot of emphasis in the quote-unquote gay community on The Wizard of Oz. Hell, during the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, friend of Dorothy was literally a slang that gay people would use to identify each other. And it's a line taken explicitly from the 1939 one. So yes, while L. Frank Baum may not have cared, frankly, I don't know if he would have cared either way. But also, I'm not sure. It depends on what you mean by a fairy tale for children, because the Oz books do get rather dark, especially in the middle and later books. The first one is probably the most young coded one, but L. Frank Baum was not unwilling to make his books extremely dark. As much as everyone is traumatized by the movie Return to Oz, in many ways, Return to Oz, and even to some extent the Wicked books, are closer to the tone of his original version than the 1938 movie is. Or is it 1939? Regardless. But yes, the gay community has always been invested in The Wizard of Oz. And like I say, historically, the phrase friend of Dorothy used to be a term that gay people would use to identify each other with. Moving on.
Isabella Brown, a YouTuber and friend of Charlie Kirk, who calls herself the resident nerd of the movement, also played the video in an episode called From Oz to Outrage, How Hollywood Hijacked Wicked and Womanhood. She examined Grande and Rivero and their press tours and reminisced about seeing the original Broadway production before Hollywood ruined it. I've been a massive fan of the story for basically my entire childhood and growing up into adulthood, she said, adding that she did still plan to see Wicked for Good once it hit theaters. These incredibly out-of-touch coastal elitist, psycho leftist members of Hollywood whether they are in front of the camera or behind the camera, are intentionally trying to manipulate some of the greatest stories of all time to specifically push a radical LGBTQ plus agenda, even if it has nothing to do with the story whatsoever.
Okay, that is objectively true. I have absolutely no problem with anything that that person just said, and good on you. And again, I'm saying this as a gay dude. Knock it off with all the LGBTQ shit. Um, and I don't see any criticisms that I can levy at the person who just said that. And again, speaking as a gay disabled dude, I would also prefer social justice and wokeness and the neo-Hegelian post-Frankfurt School critical theory that spawned it could get fucked in as explicit a means as possible, i.e., get the fuck out of the arts, get the fuck out of Hollywood, get the fuck out of overseeing properties in general. Now, that being said, and I'm not even saying this person would think that the camp gay aspect of Wizard of Oz isn't there or anything, because this person, unlike the previous person, didn't say anything to that effect. But let's be real here. The 1938 or 1939 movie was very, very fucking camp. And there's a reason why the gay community of the 30s, 40s, and 50s used elements of it to identify each other with, and so on. And there's a reason why Bette Midler and Judy Garland are like the most stereotypically gay icon coded actors ever to live. But again, other than that, I have absolutely no even hypothetical problems with what that person just said. As far as I'm concerned, this particular gay person completely and totally agrees with what was just said there. So if you take any issue with what that person just said, you can take it up with my ass. Moving on.
All right. There's something very sinister happening behind the scenes on the set of Wicked, and somebody needs to do a wellness check on both of these young women. Brown continued. Apparently, everyone's gay. Wizard is gay. The witches are gay. The professors are gay. The animals are gay. Even though literally all of this is fantasy.
I mean, okay. The original Gregory Maguire book, such as it is, did seem to build a lot of shippable material, so to speak, into the relationship between Glinda and Elphaba. It is also worth noting that Gregory Maguire himself is gay. So I agree it shouldn't be the center of the fucking analysis, and it should not be a thing that we focus on explicitly or implicitly. But I'm afraid it shouldn't be focused on explicitly or implicitly runs both ways, i.e., you don't get to be upset that gay people like it as long as they're not being ideologically puritanical little shits. In the same way as they shouldn't try to assimilate it like they're the fucking Borg, like they do with every fucking franchise. And again, I am speaking as a gay dude, so if you think you can attack this woman for saying this, I am using my gay card as a shield for her here, because I find the prideification of everything to be utterly insufferable, and critical queer theory, and indeed any form of critical theory, especially that based on Hegel's dialectical view of history, can get fucked. But yeah, there is at least some argument to be made for the original Wicked, but, and here's the important thing, Wicked is good on its own merits, and you don't need to see it through an identitarian ideological lens to appreciate it. And I think that is something that we are all really fucking sick of. This idea that identity and politics and morality needs to be at odds with artistic and intellectual merit. Can go fuck itself. Moving on.
Alright, Brown added that she wasn't reacting this way due to fear. I don't think any of us feel threatened by you, she said. We're just annoyed, frankly, that you're trying to canonically change our most beloved stories to tell timeless tales of the battle between good and evil.
Again, that may or may not arguably be true of L. Frank Baum's original books, but Elphaba was always the main character of Gregory Maguire's books, or at the very least, the first one. Spoiler alert: she dies in the first book of the Gregory Maguire trilogy, and then the other books focus on different characters, specifically her son Lear, who I am annoyed does not make it into the musical, frankly, because I enjoy Wicked the musical as its own thing, but I did really enjoy the book, and I would like to see more content from the book make it into the musical more often. But and then of course the third book in the Gregory Maguire trilogy focuses on Burr, who is who is otherwise known as the Cowardly Lion, and so on and so forth. But being that as it may, yeah, you can say that with regards to L. Frank Baum's original books, but you can't really say that about Wicked, because Wicked was always focused on Elphaba and always did have an element of her being a political activist against what is unironically a properly portrayed authoritarian, censorious Orwellian regime. And again, even in the context of seeing the Wizard of Oz as essentially baby's first Orwell is not a new thing or a thing that Gregory Maguire came up with. He just took what was implicitly there with L. Frank Baum, the G-rated Orwellianism of the Wizard, and turned it into an adult version of that Orwellianism. Moving on.
For Brett Cooper, who got her start in Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire and launched her own podcast earlier this year, the affection between Grande and Evero had a disturbing subtext. I really think, at the end of the day, it's like self-obsession with each other and an elitism, she said this week. Oh, wait, did I...
No, you didn't read that. You're good.
Well, no, I mean the first part. Brett Cooper got started in Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire, and I read that.
No.
Okay, for Brett. Okay, shut the fuck up. For Brett Cooper, who got her started at Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire and launched her own podcast earlier this year, the affection between Grande and Erivo had a disturbing subtext. I really think at the end of the day, it's like this self-obsession with each other and an elitism. She said this week, I think that they think that they and this like romance that they have with each other and their connection with the project is more important than doing their press.
And again, I don't disagree with Brett there. It is insufferable that Hollywood are a bunch of coastal elitists in a fucking isolation bubble. And it does seem that they're focusing more on themselves than on doing their fucking jobs. And even as a gay guy, I find that insufferable. Especially because when the cameras are not rolling, it doesn't really seem like Ariana and Cynthia actually care for each other that much, especially because Cynthia Erivo, when the first Wicked came out, kept bitching because people liked Ariana's portrayal of Glinda better than her portrayal of Elphaba. And I'm sorry, but hashtag skill issue. If you want people to like you more, Cynthia, try being more likable or putting more likability into your performance. Anyway, moving on.
It's cliche to say that every right-wing influencer is a failed actor, but in this case, the notion seems to be guiding their collective response to Wicked. Cooper said that doing community theater in Atlanta taught her that acting alongside others can lead to strong friendships, but she believes Grande and Rivera are taking it too far. Generally, as a theater kid, I could say this is not normal, Cooper said. Like, ladies, what is the point of this?
And again, perfectly fair criticism that I have no problem with, and I don't think was in any way homophobic or forced or anything. Also, are we seriously going to sit here and act like no leftist journalist is a failed actor, or no writer for something like She-Hulk or The Acolyte is a failed wannabe journalist? Because this at best seems like a little bit of pot and kettle, and at worst seems like something that sticks more to the left-wing perspective of I've got to get out of here and get to a major city, which is like the stereotypical like leftist growing up in a more traditional rural area mindset. And again, I'm not even going to say that that's necessarily always a problem, but there are a lot of left wingers who think that they need to become activists or journalists or actors and explicitly move to places like LA and San Francisco and New York for that specific end. So at best, we're in a tu quoque situation, and at worst, we're in a situation where it applies much more to the quote unquote leftist activists and journalist wannabes than it does to the right wingers. Moving on.
She then made the implication very clear anyway. All I'm saying is that it is 2025. It is safe to come out. Gay rights have been secured. She said, "You are welcome to tell us all what is going on behind closed doors." Anyway, that's just my theory. For decades, conservatives have responded to cultural change by starting their own institutions and making their own versions of the Hollywood films they hate, with notably mixed results. Maybe they'll try the same with The Wizard of Oz and finally create a version completely shorn of any rainbows or whimsy.
And again, that's at best projection, frankly, because what is the last 10 years of social justicizing everything other than an attempt to infiltrate Hollywood and turn it into an ideological and political hug box for the quote unquote left wing neo Hegelianism and post Frankfurt School critical theory bullshit that they've been spewing in art schools since the 60s. So, again, at best, we're in a tu quoque situation or a pot and kettle situation, and at worst, it applies much more to the social justice left wing than it does to the traditionalist right wing. Frankly, I would prefer if both of these sets of people could go fuck themselves and we could just focus on meritocracy. But then again, I think a lot of the examples you have of conservatives being triggered in that article are not actually the hyper-traditionalist John Della Rose types. They're the more libertarian populist, like Brett Cooper types that don't really have much to do with traditionalism. Yes, there are traditionalist fearmongers like Matt Walsh or Gavin McInnes or John Della Rose, but for every one John Della Rose, Gavin McInnes, or Matt Walsh, there are 1,000 Razor Fists or 1,000 like classical libertarians who think that moralism is cringe, and they are correct to think so for the most part. Moving on.
I would say that is an invitation for a person being an absolute piece of shit to others.
No. And by the way, just in case I'm not being clear, the actual family values traditionalist types who want to quote unquote think of the children all the time, the Helen Lovejoy pearl culture types, like Matt Walsh and Gavin McInnes and John Della Rose, can go fuck themselves. Just like the Anita Sarkeesian style social justiceoids. I would prefer if neither family values traditionalism nor social justice neo-Hegelian crap had any leeway to censor or stifle discourse, period. My approach is a populist, small L libertarian one, where everyone gets to produce whatever kind of art they want, and then it fails or succeeds on the basis not of its politics and morality, but on the basis of its actual quality. But I realize I'm apparently radical like that. A world free from family values traditionalism, and Frederick Wertham and J. Thomas Bowdler, and also free of people like Robin DiAngelo, Zoe Quinn, and Anita Sarkeesian, is a world where I would prefer to exist. Neither social justice nor family values traditionalism should have moralistic authoritarian sway over what society does or does not do. The Hays Code can get fucked, but so can ESG, DEI, and Bridge. Moving on.
Don't really want to talk about this.
Yes. The positive thing this week is has been Hotel Season 2 has finished. And so I am going to review it. And I made Brainstormer also do it so that I'm not just monologuing.
I guess I'll get my thoughts out of the way simply because, I don't really have much to say. I think I was pretty clear when the first season came out. I wasn't terribly interested in it because, I'll be honest, it did not grab me. I will say it's certainly better than season 1 a bit, but it still got its problems, which I'm sure Dawn will get more into. It's not bad. I don't know. Yeah, it just doesn't grab me, unfortunately. And I think some songs are better. And Dawn and I had somewhat of a discourse earlier before we started the stream because we briefly talked about it. And on some of the songs, but it's not bad. It's not bad. It's just like I did not really feel anything when I was watching it.
I will say that it started very, very slow. The first 3 episodes were annoyingly bland. I think starting at episode 4 and all the way through to episode 8, though, that was some really great TV. I think it would have helped the proceedings if episodes 2 and 3 were somehow combined together, so we could have gotten another episode. Honestly, I think you could have even done if you. I'm not even saying do like an insanely long episode or even do like an hour. I'm saying if every episode was about as long as the finale was, you could have combined episode 1, 2, and 3 into a single episode, and then given us 3 more, and then given us at least 2 more episodes to play with. And I do think the show would have benefited from that. But as soon as it hit episode 4, the pacing did improve significantly because the actual plot started, moving along. In terms of my favorite songs this time around, I think the best ones were a lot of the slower ones, like Losing Streak, Live to Live, but also a lot of the more multifaceted, big, big Broadway theatrical ones, like When I Think About the Future, and in particular, I really, really dug. I really, really dug Hear My Hope. I will say also that like 3 out of 4 of Vox's songs this time around. And he did get the majority of the songs because he was the main villain this time around. But I really did enjoy Up There Bad With Us, and Vox Populi.
And this is where Dawn and I had kind of a discourse. Not so much like argument or anything. I just think it's because of our different tastes in music. Where I really liked Brighter.
I did not. I also didn't like Gravity, which I know I'm in a much more minority position for, because I think everyone other than me liked Gravity this time around. But the thing is, like, a dark villain song like a Brighter or Gravity lives or dies on the strength of the villain in question who is singing them. And Vox is such a pathetic little bitch, and Lute is such a whiny little shit that I can't take them seriously as actual threatening characters.
Okay,
because
you know
they're
that's fair.
because they're so pathetic. The only person who successfully has managed to be like villainously threatening, and this is true in season 1 as well, has. Oh no, I will give it to them. I did find Adam's bravado at least a little bit more justified than I found Lute or Vox this season. But for the most part, the character who is channeling the most like Disney villain vibes is of course Alistair. His portion of Stayed Gone is still probably the most traditional villain song like moment that we've gotten. And by the way, speaking of Alistair, can we give him more solos, please? I do like him playing off people in duets and so on, but I would like to see him get at least one solo per season. I'm not saying more than that because, frankly, I think Alistair would be best saved for the end of the show. I think the most sensible thing to do, especially given the plot of season 2, is make Lute the primary antagonist of season 3 and make Valentino the secondary protagonist of season 3. Then have Lilith be the primary antagonist of season 4. I don't know what to do with regards to the secondary antagonist of season 4, but then make Rue and Alistair the final antagonist of season 5. I say the final antagonist of season 5 because so far Vivian Medrano, Vivzy Pop, has only said that she has plans for 5 seasons. Now, because I am a selfish little shit, and who grew up in the 90s and early 2000s, my benchmark for a successful show is always going to be 7 seasons of a movie. The old Joss Whedon chestnut. So if she wants to do more seasons than the 5 she has alluded to, then all the more power to her. But in that case, my standard is going to be save Alistair for the end. And anyone who Alistair is working for/with for the end. Because the thing is, Alistair is the main reason to watch this show for me. And I don't really have confidence in the show's ability to keep my interest after Alistair is defeated. So save Alistair for the end so that I have a reason to watch every season. Because as long as Alistair is Alistairing, I will show up for the show. It's a little bit like Rumpelstiltskin from Once Upon a Time. No matter how badly written some seasons of Once Upon a Time were, it was still worth watching for Rumpelstiltskin. Fortunately, it seems like Vivzy Pop and I are on the same page with this because she has said many times that she wants, or at least alluded to the fact that she wants Alistair to be one of the final big bads. I think the most final big bad is going to be Rue, the root of all evil, who may or may not be possessing Eve. But I think, at the very least, Rue is likely going to be the Palpatine to Alistair's Darth Vader in the final season. Anyway, speaking of Alistair and that whole rigmarole, I laughed when a lot of people put Alistair on Fraud Watch after episode 4 because of Don't You Forget. and because of him signing himself away to the V's. But I knew pretty much as soon as the first rendition of Don't You Forget ended that Alistair was up to something, because he's a puppet master and that's what he do. I will, however, say that the person we should most properly be putting on Fraud Watch is fucking Rosie. Because, okay, one, either she is a sinner, in which case she made someone explicitly more powerful than her, which I don't think is a continuity error or a problem, because my headcanon and fan theory is that if she is a sinner, she was able to make someone more powerful than her because the energy that she gave him when they made the deal, when Alistair was still alive, ended up kind of acting as a seed, so that when he became a sinner proper, it would metastasize and let him be extremely powerful. Again, think of a tree growing from a tiny seed. Essentially, seed magic was, I think, what she gave him. If indeed she was a sinner. If it turns out that she is Lilith, or she is Rue, or she is someone else who doesn't technically fit in the sinner category, then obviously I revise and retract my statement. But assuming she is a sinner and was able to make someone more powerful than her by way of the seed magic thing that I just alluded to, then she is really, really fucking stupid. Because if she is a sinner and she was able to make someone more powerful than her, honey, your guard dog only works as a guard dog when he, likes you and wants to see good things happen to you. So taunting him and avoiding doing the very simple thing he asked you to do is doing nothing but hurting yourself. And in particular, the moment where I lost basically all of the respect I had for Rosie was during Hear My Hope, when she's bitching at him for finding a way out of his deal with her. I lost all respect for her because she explicitly said, "Do it on your own" at the end of Don't You Forget, the first version. What the fuck did you think that was going to be, Rosie? You explicitly told him that you are capable of fixing his staff, but you're not gonna yet because in due time, blah 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 blah. And then you taunted him just enough to make him pissed off at you. And then you told him, "I'm out, do it yourself." Well, what does him doing it himself look like other than finding a way to weasel out of your deal? It would have been much more sensible of you just to fix his staff like he asked you to, and then you have a agent that is back up to par. Now, mind you, she might have had some scheming reason as to why wait to fix his staff. But you didn't tell Alistair that, and so you saying, "Well, sure, I could do it, but I'm not gonna yet," is going to piss him off. And you explicitly told him to go solve it himself. And in an effort to do the thing you asked him to do, which is figure out a way to solve it himself, he had to find a way out of your deal in order to do it, because he is now pissed at you for not essentially keeping up your end of the bargain. And if he were asking something more extreme from you as a result of that, then I could understand Don't You Forget and its subtext. But all he was really asking for was, "Hey, would you mind fixing my staff and maybe helping me out with the injury?" And you decided to taunt him instead of doing the Machiavellianly smart thing, which is, if you want this guard dog to be useful to you, Rosie, especially if that guard dog is more powerful than you, you've got to stay on good terms with it. And if you explicitly go out of your way not to stay on good terms with it, don't be surprised when that dog turns and bites you. And honestly, I do hope that Alistair didn't just get his staff fixed in their interlude of Hear My Hope, because I full on want him to reverse grip on her. I want her to now be on his leash. Because after the bullshit that was Don't You Forget, and then the bullshit of her being pissed at him when he did the thing that she told him to do, which is solve it yourself. No, she deserves to fully be on his leash now. We need to see Rosie get out of Fraud Watch. People prematurely thought that Alistair should be on Fraud Watch. No, fuck you. Rosie is the one who deserves to be on Fraud Watch. Because she explicitly pissed off someone that she needs help from, and then told him to go solve it himself, and then had the nerve to be pissed off at him when he did seek to solve it himself. So, I honestly want a reprise of Don't You Forget in Season 3 with Alistair being the one in control of Rosie for once. Because she deserved it after the short-sighted, arrogant stupidity that was this season's nonsense. I also just think that Alistair needs to get back on top at some point, because I understand the reason why he had his character building fall arc, but that character building fall arc has now been completed, and I'm rooting for Alistair to get back on top. So I hope that season 3 features him doing a lot more to solidify his power base. I also hope that, given that I think Boot is going to be the main villain of season 3 and Valentino is going to be the secondary villain, I hope that Alistair is the one who gets to butcher Loot at the end so that he can redeem himself from having failed against Adam. I also kind of hope that he ends up buying Angel from Valentino so that he can then make a very big play of freeing Husk and Angel from contract in order that they can be redeemed and go to heaven together. Because I think from a Machiavellian manipulation standpoint, the easiest way for Alistair to demonstrate loyalty to the hotel and loyalty to Charlie and Lucifer is to buy Angel from Val and then free both Angel and Husk at the same time so that they can ascend together. I also think it would be interesting if Alistair has Angel and Husk ascend so that he can then use them to spy on heaven. Because that would be very interesting to have Alistair deliberately seek their redemption so that he would then have agents in heaven that are essentially, infiltrating the walls, so to speak. Because I do think Alistair is going to do a smarter version of what Vox was trying to do, which is get inside of heaven and rule it from within. I just think that that's probably going to manifest in one of a few ways. The obvious one would be if he does do what I'm suggesting and use Angel and Husk as agents. Another option would be if Alistair seeks to get redeemed himself, not so that he can be a good person, but so that he can have the option of becoming the new god, essentially. But yeah, I hope in the future Has-Been Hotel is better at their episode use, because there's no reason why episode 1, 2, and 3 had to be 3 episodes. They could have been 1 or maybe 2, and then we could have used the extra slots to do some more storytelling. I do think season 2 has more good episodes in it than season 1 did, though, because obviously in season 1 they had the problem of, well, we have to set up basically the whole world of the show. Whereas in season 2, like I say, episode 4 is where the plot begins in earnest, and it continues at a relatively rapid pace until episode 8. And I think even episode 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 of season 2 are better than the majority of episodes in season 1. I just think, and I hope, that we don't have to go through 3 episodes next time to get everyone caught back up. I want the show to learn how to use its time more efficiently and hit the ground running and don't stop running until the end of the show, please. Because a little bit of recap in episode 1 of a new season is understandable, but you don't need 3 episodes of an 8-episode show to do that. You should be able to do that in 1 episode and then have every other episode of the season focusing on the main plot. Moving on.
I guess for that, folks, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, avidazai, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
Shalom and fuck off.